Al Jazeera Podcasts.
Today, a crackdown on dissent in Venezuela.
The government says those who do not recognize the results could face up to 6 years in prison, but many did not seem to care.
With President Nicolas Maduro defiant and the opposition rallying support, what's next for Venezuela's post-election standoff? I'm Malika Bilal, and this is The Take.
People are trying their best to go about their daily lives, getting ready for the new school year and going to work. But at the same time, there is widespread fear. My name is Anneke. I'm a reporter. I'm based in New York, and I was born and raised in Caracas, Venezuela.
Welcome to The Take, Anneke. It's really good to have you. A lot has happened when it comes to news out of Venezuela over the past month plus, and that's all following the disputed election in which President Nicolas Maduro has claimed victory. We're speaking on Monday, and we've just heard breaking news that the U.S. has seized President Maduro's plane. What do we know about that, and how big of a deal is that?
Well, this is Venezuela's version of Air Force One, so it's bound to raise tensions between the Maduro regime and the U.S. government. It seems that its acquisition was in violation of U.S. sanctions, and that's why the U.S. government was able to seize it. I think it also shows how no one is above the law.
This just points to the pressure that's mounting on Nicolas Maduro following that July 28th election. So, Anneke, you are outside the country, but I know that you have been covering the news closely on your Instagram broadcast channel. So you know that in the past month, there have been reports of all kinds of repression since that election from the government against his opponents. Who's being targeted in this government crackdown, and what are they facing?
Well, Maduro has shown in the past month that he's willing to do anything to stay in power. Days before the election, he actually said there would be a bloodbath if he didn't win, and he seems to be delivering on that promise. At least 24 people have been shot. Most of them were out protesting in the days following the elections. According to local NGOs, some of them were just walking by. At the same time, more than 1,500 people have been detained. And that includes local politicians, members of the opposition, activists, reporters, even teenagers. I mean, more than 120 kids have been detained, some of them as young as 13. Over the weekend, some were reportedly released, but think about the trauma that these children have lived through over the past few weeks. The people who are being detained could face up to 30, 40 years in prison. And one of them, Maria Oropesa, who is a member of the opposition party of Vente Venezuela, she was a local coordinator in the state of Portuguesa. She was even able to live stream as security forces broke into her home with no arrest warrant and no search warrant. And then you can see her wrestling with them as they take her phone away, and then the recording goes dark. I mean, that just shows what's happening in Venezuela. And there is widespread fear right now. I've been asking my friends, what's going on? Can you guys tell me? And one of them who I spoke to yesterday, she was like, I would love to, but I just don't feel safe.
So let's take listeners and viewers back to July 28th, because as of now, according to the official results of the National Electoral Council, which is controlled by allies of Maduro, he won by 51.2% of the vote. The opposition is disputing those results of that July 28th election, and they say that his main rival, Edmundo Gonzalez, won by a landslide. They've published a significant portion of the voting tallies. Maduro and the Electoral Council have not. So where do we stand as of today?
So for the first time in 25 years, the opposition managed to get control of copies of the actas. The actas are the voting tally sheets, and they are the ultimate proof of election results in Venezuela. And this is where opposition leader María Corina Machado outsmarted not just the government, but even the opposition leaders who came before her. It took months of planning and thousands of volunteers to be able to get a hold of these tally sheets. The tally sheets have a number, they have a QR code. It's pretty much impossible to falsify them. The tally sheets show that Edmundo González Urrutia won with 67% of the vote. I also think it's important to note that the Carter Center, which was one of the very few international organizations allowed by the government to be present on election eve, said that they cannot recognize Maduro's victory.
Where are Maria Corina and Edmundo González right now? Because I know that the opposition is still challenging these results. They are still pushing for the public to know about what they say happened. What's the status of how they're doing that?
Well, María Corina Machado and Edmundo González are both in hiding right now. We've seen María Corina a few times in the different protests that have been organized in Caracas by the opposition.
A Venezuela that used to believe in Chavismo doesn't want to impose a farce. It has dignity, it has honesty, and today it defends the truth.
And we've seen her in interviews. We've seen Edmundo speaking in front of the EU a few days ago. But I mean, I think that just shows the environment in which Venezuelans are living right now, that you have to go into hiding just because you're the leader and the candidate of the opposition.
And they're in hiding because there were specific threats, at least against González, right, that he might be arrested. Can you tell me about what we know about that?
Yes. So the Attorney General, Tarek William Saab, said that there would be an investigation into González for what he considers contempt and disobedience to the law. So González has been summoned twice to appear at the Attorney General's office to testify. He has said that he will not go because there's going to be no due process. And at the same time, he's being accused of crimes that he says he didn't commit. The Attorney General did say that if he were to dismiss the letter a third time, that could trigger an arrest warrant. I think it may not be in the best interest of the government to arrest Edmundo González. I can see how that would spark massive protest. But again, the government has shown over the past few weeks that they're capable of anything. So I think it's really hard to tell at this point.
After the break, what this dispute has meant for Maduro's support and what it could mean for Venezuela's future. So, Anneke, on top of the opposition pressure on Maduro's government, there's also pressure from outside the country. We started this conversation talking about the U.S. seizing Maduro's plane. So you have the U.S., you have the EU, but you even have traditional allies like Brazil, Colombia, and Mexico who are calling on Maduro to release voting records. Members of the Venezuelan diaspora are also protesting. And I wonder what that means for internal pressure on Nicolas Maduro. In 2019, around the time of the failed uprising led by Juan Guaidó to oust Maduro, many of the poorest people of the country still pledged their support for him. As the heir to the former president, Hugo Chavez, has that changed now? Do we still see that same strong support for Maduro?
Maduro has definitely lost a ton of support over the past few years. Just to give you an example, in Petare, which is one of the biggest favelas in Caracas, Maduro lost in all 3 voting centers. And the same applies to El Valle, which is a working class neighborhood where Maduro himself grew up. So I think that shows how Maduro has really lost. I mean, in Venezuela, they say, perdió la calle, kind of like he lost the common folk. Most of them have been siding with María Corina Machado and with Edmundo's candidacy. There's a fascinating article that was published a few days ago by a local outlet called the Caracas Chronicles, and it tells the story of a woman who lives in Bolívar, which is a state in the southern part of the country. She basically depends on government subsidies. She has been working for the government for many years. And in this election, she was tasked with getting at least 90 votes for Maduro. And it's interesting because she says that she herself didn't even vote for Maduro. She's like, look, I can't make ends meet.
So someone working for his campaign admits that she didn't actually vote for the person she's helping to campaign for.
Exactly.
Wow. Why do you think that is? What does that tell you about Maduro's last term?
I think it shows that people are starting to realize that Maduro is Hugo Chávez's legacy. He was seen as a long time as a distant figure from Chávez. But the reality is that Maduro has continued many of the policies and programs that were implemented by Chávez in the first place. We've also gone through hyperinflation, record hyperinflation, food shortages. I mean, that's just no way to live. At the same time, there's very limited access to water, gas, electricity, and people are tired of it and they're looking for a new opportunity. They're looking for what Edmundo and Maria Corina represent. And Maria Corina, she was banned from office last year. She won the opposition primary, but she wasn't able to run. She was embraced by thousands. Somebody who was actually in one of her rallies a few weeks ago told me that they were surprised by people crying when they saw her.
Wow.
I mean, she's become, they call her the Iron Lady, and I don't think it's for nothing. I think she will go down in history as one of our most notable figures.
What do you think it means then, since we started this conversation talking about the government crackdown on people who've been protesting the election results, that many of their arrests happened in some of those poorest areas of the country?
I'm glad that you mentioned that because I think that's actually one of the things that may backfire against Maduro. In the days after the election, the poorest neighborhoods were the ones who took to the streets. And they were the vast majority of people who have been arrested came from these neighborhoods and from these areas of mostly from Caracas. The vast majority of people who were killed in the protest also come from these areas. So that's just bound to make Maduro even more unpopular.
Maduro has survived a lot.
We ask the world, keep your nose out of Venezuela's internal affairs and respect Venezuela's sovereignty and internal affairs.
Mass protests in 2017, the botched attempt to replace him in 2019. If he survives this, what could another 6 years of Maduro look like?
The repression has been so widespread that it obviously makes the government even more unpopular. I mean, we may be seeing another massive wave of migration in the region.
You know, Anneke, hearing the stats is one thing, but understanding the stories behind these people who make this really difficult decision to pick up and leave everything they know and immigrate outside of the country because of these conditions that you're talking about. What is that like? I know that you have friends and family who have likely had to make that determination for themselves. How do people come to that determination?
I mean, leaving your home country is truly not easy. I left when I was 18. I thought that I would be back by then, and that still hasn't happened. Venezuelans are no longer gathering around the dinner table for Christmas. Now we're celebrating virtually on Zoom and FaceTime. Most Venezuelan families have been separated. Roughly 25% of the population has fled. And I think the vast majority of people see in Edmundo González and in Maria Corina the opportunity to go back home.
And that's The Take. This episode was produced by Tamara Khandaker, Sarí el-Khalili, Sonia Bhagat, and Khaled Soltan, with Duha Mosaad, Shraddha Joshi, Hagir Saleh, Philip Lanos, Hisham Abu Saleh, Noor Wazwaz, and me, Malika Bilal. It was edited by Alexandra Locke. Special thanks to Dana Balut, Angelique Molina, and Yusuf Abdel-Nabi. Our sound designer is Alex Roldan. Alexandra Locke is The Take's executive producer, and Nate Alvarez is Al Jazeera's head of audio. We'll be back tomorrow.